Japan is often seen as a country with no visible homelessness. The streets are spotless, there are no tent cities, and official reports suggest the problem barely exists. In January 2025, the government reported just 2,591 homeless people across the entire country. But this picture is misleading. Homelessness in Japan is not absent, it's simply hidden. In places like Tokyo, Osaka, and Yokohama, people without stable housing live in small rented rooms, capsule hotels, or even internet cafes. These living arrangements are not counted in the official definition of homelessness, which only includes people living in parks, on the streets, or in other public places. That's how so many homeless people are erased from the statistics. Kotobuki in Yokohama is one of Japan's 3 traditional day labor towns, alongside Sanya in Tokyo and Kamigasaki in Osaka. These neighborhoods are home to older, poor men who survive by doing temporary jobs. They often live in tiny rooms, just 54 square feet, barely large enough for a mattress, a small fridge, and basic belongings. In 2016, residents in Kotobuki received about 146,000 yen, around $1,250, a month in welfare, most of which went toward rent and daily expenses. Despite living in poverty and poor conditions, these individuals are not officially considered homeless. Cultural pressure plays a major role. In Japan, showing hardship in public is seen as shameful. People who lose their jobs or homes often hide their situation. They don't beg or camp on the streets. Instead, they sleep in cardboard boxes at night and pack them away during the day to remain invisible. Many avoid applying for social aid due to embarrassment or the complexity of the system. One of the most overlooked groups are the so-called internet café refugees. In 2020, an estimated 15,000 people in Tokyo were living in internet cafes, far more than the official homeless count. These cafes offer private booths, food, drinks, showers, and basic privacy, making them a shelter of last resort for people who can't afford housing. Japan hasn't ignored the issue entirely. Government programs since the 1990s have provided support, including the 2002 Homeless Self-Support Act, which aimed to help people get back on their feet through jobs and housing. The country also has a low rate of illegal drug use, which contributes to lower visible homelessness compared to places like the US. However, alcoholism and mental health issues remain widespread among the homeless population. Experts believe the real number of homeless people in Japan could be anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000. The issue began after World War II, but worsened during the economic crash of the 1990s. More recently, the COVID-19 pandemic pushed even more people to the edge. Soup kitchens saw a 4-fold increase in visitors, and housing support requests surged. When internet cafes were forced to close, the government temporarily booked hotel rooms to prevent a street crisis, one of the few times the hidden homeless were directly acknowledged. But Japan isn't the only place where homelessness hides in plain sight. Around the world, different countries have found surprising ways to cover up or redefine what it means to be homeless. Let's take a look at some of the most unexpected cases. Finland, the country that ended homelessness. Finland is frequently held up as a global success story for tackling homelessness. While many countries struggle with growing numbers of people living on the streets, Finland took a radically different approach known as housing first. Instead of making sobriety, employment, or mental health treatment a requirement before providing housing, Finland flipped the script. Give people a permanent home first, then offer support. Since launching the program nationally in the late 2000s, Finland's homelessness numbers have steadily declined. Visible street homelessness has nearly disappeared in cities like Helsinki. The country even repurposed old shelters into long-term apartment units. On paper, it looks like Finland has all but solved homelessness. But here's the twist. Critics say the reality is more complicated. While the numbers are encouraging, not everyone is housed, and not everyone stays housed. Many who suffer from severe mental illness or substance abuse continue to cycle through temporary shelters or supportive housing, unable to maintain stable living situations. In rural areas or among immigrants, long-term housing and social services can be harder to access. Some argue that the end of homelessness in Finland is more a shift in definition, from visible street homelessness to hidden or institutionalized homelessness. So, did Finland really end homelessness? Or did it just change the way homelessness looks? It's a model the world can learn from, but it's not the fairy tale ending many headlines suggest. South Korea, the net café nomads. In the high-tech, fast-paced heart of Seoul, you'll find a surprising kind of resident, people who live not in apartments, but in 24-hour internet cafes, known locally as PC bangs. These cafes, originally designed for gamers, have quietly become a refuge for hundreds, if not thousands, of young South Koreans who can't afford rent in one of Asia's most expensive housing markets. For around 10,000 won a night, about $7 to $8, they get a reclining chair, a locker, access to food and drinks, and, of course, fast internet. It's not glamorous, but it's warm, safe, and private enough to get by. Some even store clothes in bags and brush their teeth in cafe bathrooms. They're not tourists or addicts. They're part of a growing group nicknamed Net Cafe Nomads. Here's the twist. Most of them have jobs. They're delivery drivers, temp workers, convenience store clerks, or even office staff. But their wages haven't kept up with the cost of living, especially when it comes to housing. Tiny goshiwon rooms, often just a bed and desk, still cost more than many can afford. With no safety net and rising youth unemployment, even full-time workers are being priced out of stable housing. It's a strange paradox. In a country known for its technological advancement and modern lifestyle, an entire segment of society is quietly living in limbo, employed but homeless, drifting between night shifts and glowing screens. South Korea's net cafe nomads are a stark reminder that homelessness today doesn't always look like tents or cardboard boxes. Sometimes it looks like a glowing monitor, a swivel chair, and a young adult trying to sleep before another long day. United States, the working homeless. In the world's richest country, homelessness is often seen as a crisis of unemployment, addiction, or personal failure. But the reality is far more complex and far more unsettling. Every night in America, tens of thousands of people go to work during the day, then sleep in their cars, cheap motels, or temporary shelters. They are janitors, teachers' aides, fast food workers, warehouse staff, rideshare drivers, even nurses. Many have full-time jobs, some work 2 or 3. They are the working homeless, people who earn paychecks but still can't afford a place to live. Skyrocketing rents, stagnant wages, and the lack of affordable housing have created a silent crisis. In cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle, a one-bedroom apartment can cost more than an entire month's salary. Even in smaller towns, the cost of living has outpaced wages for years. But here's the twist. Being homeless in America no longer means being unemployed. In fact, many shelters now report that a growing number of their residents leave each morning in work uniforms. School districts across the country are quietly tracking students who sleep in cars or couch surf, even though their parents are employed. And some companies like Amazon have faced criticism after reports that employees sleep in parking lots or in vans because they can't afford housing nearby. The American dream promises that hard work leads to stability. But for the working homeless, that promise is broken. They're doing everything right and still falling through the cracks. This isn't just a housing crisis. It's a reality check about what it means to make it in modern America. Singapore, clean streets, but at what cost? Walk through Singapore's streets at night and you'll see a city that looks almost flawless, modern, gleaming, and meticulously clean. There are no tents under flyovers, no cardboard shelters along sidewalks, and almost no visible sign of homelessness. But that's not because it doesn't exist. Singapore does have homeless people. They're just hard to see. Many sleep quietly in public parks, void decks, the ground floors of public housing blocks, or 24-hour fast food outlets. Some carry gym bags and use public facilities to clean up before heading to work. They're known as the hidden homeless. Why are they so invisible? Here's the twist. Strict laws, social stigma, and sky-high housing costs keep them out of sight. Singapore enforces public order rigorously, and sleeping in public spaces can result in fines or police warnings. At the same time, housing is expensive. Even public flats require long waiting periods, income proofs, and sometimes family co-applicants. But perhaps the most powerful force keeping the homeless in the shadows is shame. In a culture that highly values family reputation and self-reliance, many people who lose their homes hide the fact, even from close relatives. Elderly homeless individuals in particular may avoid seeking help because they fear burdening their families or being seen as failures. And so, despite the city's spotless image, the problem hasn't disappeared. It's been silenced. Singapore has taken steps in recent years, like launching a national rough sleeper task force and building transitional shelters. But for many, the combination of tight rules, cultural pressure, and rising living costs means they remain in a kind of social exile, always present but never truly visible. United Kingdom, sofa surfing and hidden homelessness. When most people think of homelessness, they picture tents on sidewalks or people sleeping rough under bridges. But in the United Kingdom, the reality is far more hidden and far more widespread. Every night, tens of thousands of people in the UK aren't sleeping on the streets, but on sofas, in spare rooms, or on floors, staying temporarily with friends, ex-partners, or extended family. This is known as sofa surfing, a polite term that hides a desperate situation. It's not a stable arrangement. It means no fixed address, no lease, no guarantee you can stay another night. Some bounce between homes for months or even years, constantly at risk of being asked to leave. Many are young people, single parents, or those escaping abusive relationships. Here's the twist. In 2023, it was estimated that over 250,000 people in the UK were homeless, but the vast majority weren't sleeping rough. They were in temporary accommodations, hostels, shelters, or quietly couch surfing out of sight. This form of homelessness is harder to see, and therefore easier to ignore. But the effects are just as real: mental stress, poor health, disrupted education, and constant instability. And with rents skyrocketing and social housing in short supply, the number of hidden homeless continues to grow. In Britain's towns and cities, you may not see homelessness at first glance, but it's there, just behind closed doors, silently reshaping lives. Canada, Indigenous homelessness in remote regions. When people think of homelessness in Canada, they often picture urban encampments in cities like Toronto or Vancouver. But in the remote northern regions, a very different and often overlooked crisis is unfolding. In isolated First Nations communities, many Indigenous families live in overcrowded, crumbling, or even mold-infested homes. It's not uncommon to find 10 or more people crammed into a single small house. Bedrooms are shared by multiple generations, and basic necessities like clean water, reliable heating, or functioning plumbing are often missing. These aren't just bad living conditions, they're a form of hidden homelessness. Here's the twist. Because these individuals technically have a roof over their heads, they're not officially counted as homeless. Canadian government statistics often exclude people living in unsafe, unstable, or temporary dwellings, especially in Indigenous communities. As a result, the true scale of Indigenous homelessness remains underreported and misunderstood. This invisibility is part of a much deeper issue: the legacy of colonization, systemic neglect, and underfunding. Generations of displacement, residential schools, and broken treaties have left many Indigenous communities without adequate infrastructure or housing support. In some regions, wait lists for a new home can stretch for years, with little relief in sight. So while Canada is known for its progressive image and universal healthcare, there's a hidden crisis unfolding in its northern territories, one where entire communities live in conditions most Canadians would never tolerate, but the system doesn't classify as homelessness. It's a reminder that homelessness isn't always visible, and in some places, it's buried under decades of silence and structural inequality. China, the jobless rat tribe in Beijing. Beneath the shining skyscrapers and bustling streets of Beijing lies a hidden world, a labyrinth of underground rooms, bunkers, and basements where tens of thousands of young workers and job seekers live out of sight. They're known as the Shuzhou, or the rat tribe. Most of them are migrants from rural provinces, drawn to the capital by dreams of opportunity. But Beijing's soaring cost of living and strict housing rules leave them with few options. With no local residency permit, or hukou, they're often locked out of affordable housing, public services, and even job protections. So instead, they go underground, literally. These makeshift dwellings were originally built as bomb shelters during the Cold War. Today, they've been illegally converted into tiny windowless units, often with no ventilation, no plumbing, and no fire exits. Residents share bathrooms at the end of a hallway and sleep in cramped bunks or narrow spaces barely large enough to stand up in. Rent is cheap, but the price is a life lived in the shadows. Here's the twist. They're not counted as homeless. They have roofs over their heads, but not real homes. This hidden population lives in Asia's wealthiest capital cities, yet remains largely invisible. The government has periodically cracked down on these illegal spaces, evicting residents en masse. But with no other affordable options, many simply move from one underground bunker to another. In a country racing toward modernization, the rat tribe represents a jarring contradiction. Educated, ambitious youth living beneath the surface of prosperity, surviving in the dark while the city above them gleams. India. Religious disguise of poverty. In India, it's common to see wandering sadhus, ascetic holy men draped in saffron robes, covered in ash, walking barefoot from town to town. They are deeply woven into the spiritual fabric of the country, often seen as enlightened, detached from material needs, and living in pursuit of higher truths. But not all sadhus have chosen this path for spiritual reasons. Many of them are effectively homeless, living on the streets, sleeping in temples or roadside shelters, and surviving on public offerings and temple food. Some suffer from untreated mental illness, addiction, or poverty, but they are rarely labeled as homeless or poor. But here's the twist. Because they wear the garb of religion, society treats them with reverence instead of concern. Their poverty is masked by spiritual symbolism, making their suffering easy to overlook. In reality, many are destitute, aging, and unwell, but help rarely comes. They fall outside the reach of most social safety nets. No permanent address, no documentation, no family support. Some may have once chosen the sadhu life. Others were abandoned, ostracized, or forced into it by circumstance. But now, they live in a liminal space, neither housed nor truly homeless, visible in plain sight but hidden behind centuries of cultural reverence. In a country where poverty and spirituality often intertwine, the sadhu figure creates a strange paradox, a sacred identity that can both protect and trap those living in extreme deprivation. It's a reminder that homelessness doesn't always wear rags, it can wear robes. Germany, hidden homelessness among refugees. Germany is often praised for its structured approach to the refugee crisis. After the 2015 migrant wave, the country opened its doors to over 1 million asylum seekers. But behind this humanitarian effort lies a more complex, often invisible issue: hidden homelessness among refugees and asylum seekers. Thousands of people, many of them families, live in temporary accommodations that were never meant for long-term stays. Converted shipping containers, refugee hostels, army barracks, even gymnasiums. Some have been stuck in these places for years, waiting for decisions on their asylum applications or struggling to find affordable housing in cities with tight rental markets. These shelters are often overcrowded, with little privacy, basic facilities, and shared toilets or kitchens. Residents can be relocated without notice, sometimes across the country, breaking their ties to schools, jobs, or community support. Here's the twist. They aren't counted in street homelessness statistics. Because they're housed, technically, they don't show up in the numbers. But in reality, they have no stable home, no permanence, and no real freedom. Even those granted asylum face massive hurdles: language barriers, discrimination, and job insecurity. Without a steady income or rental history, landlords are often unwilling to rent to them. As a result, many remain trapped in the shelter system, living in limbo. Germany's hidden refugee homelessness challenges the conventional idea of what it means to have a home. These are people caught between crisis and stability, sheltered but not secure, living lives that are invisible to much of society. In a nation known for its order and precision, their uncertainty is the silent cost of a system struggling to keep up with a global humanitarian reality.